Okay, so this athlete is returning from injury. They actually broke their femur a couple of months ago. So if I bring up the seasonal planner chart here, if I move myself over here, you can see injury occurred here. Um, so in May, uh, big recovery period, detraining, and then they've started to ride again. It's actually pretty quick recovery given the injury, but now that I'm going to start planning their training, the rider is still stuck on the trainer, so everything has to be suitable for that. And you can see like the analysis. That was a dual recording, which I will delete. Doing the analysis is quite difficult because they're on the trainer and there's a whole bunch of files, for every session. So that takes a while. But let's get into the scheduling now. Zwift Academy starts next week, so they're going to be doing that. So what I've done to get started is I've plugged in some of the Zwift Academy sessions. So it starts with the benchmark test, and then there's There's 4 workouts and a recovery ride to do in the 4-week block. So we've got workout 1, workout 2, workout 3, workout 4, and then the recovery ride. So the sessions are like this. So in block 1, there's a VO2 max over under thing, VO2 intervals like that, and a lactate tolerance workout. Actually, it looks like there's only 3 workouts and a recovery ride. Let me just double check that. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so 3 workouts and a recovery ride. So one of these to do up until in a 4-week block. So this week I will shift these around. So there's no workout 4. There's just 3 workouts. I want them to do 1 workout per week. And they will be a key session, so I'll use that as an intense session, and then we've got the recovery ride there. So this is a very well-trained athlete, highly motivated, and they want to progress as fast as possible. In terms of the goal, there's no race goals because they're still injured. They're just looking to return, back to fitness as fast as possible. So they previously had a threshold around sort of 360, 370, and at the moment their FTP is around 340. So looking to get back there as fast as they can without obviously compromising their return from injury. So what I will do is firstly start off with the key sessions. Now, key sessions were this sub-threshold work, which has been really progressing along nicely. So I'm going to get them to repeat this sub-threshold session here, which I've got them to do twice. I'll repeat that again for the next 3 weeks. So key session, put it on a Friday. I moved that. I should have copied it. So copy that, hold Alt, copy it to the next day. No progression in terms of duration in full length or anything like that. For this session, it's going to be overloading purely in terms of power output. So I'm communicating with the athlete, telling them to bump up the power each week and see that progression in terms of the intensity. So I will leave that for the next 2 weeks. Now, this week has a benchmark test. This will be a really hard session. There's 3 different climbs you have to go up on Zwift on the route. So that'll be a hard session. So that's 2 intense sessions per week. Now, the athlete can handle a lot. It's more around actually getting to do a little bit less than they think they need. So key session. They can certainly handle 1 more intense session, which I usually get them to do a Zwift race, just as a bit of fun. So this session I'm beginning to do is Zwift race with some tempo for some added volume, which they can certainly handle. I will get them to do, but I'll keep it separate. So I'll get them to do that on Sunday. So spreading out the key sessions over the week, so they're not really backing them up. Then we're looking at 1, 2, 3. So we're looking at 3 hours, 40 minutes of key work. I'm just thinking, do they need any more for this week? Now, this is when I'll kind of refer to the seasonal planner chart in terms of their load. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. This week into their 5th building week. Now, this athlete isn't going to follow like a 3 hard, 1 light cycle because they're still returning to fitness. They don't need that. At the amount of load this athlete's doing now will cover just with a recovery day. So what I'm going to do is that's an extremely hard session. As you can see here, so 2 hours and 8 minutes, 169 T-score. So I'm going to get them to repeat that there. So they will do a lighter day on on Monday. So session I'd get here is I want them to be really having their best legs for this session. So I'm going to get them to do a taper ride, as if sort of like a pre-race ride. So I've got one I prescribed that I've made, so taperfuls I call it, and I'll actually not give them the shortest variant. I want them to get some volume out of it, so I'll make it an hour and a half. And then that's going to be hard, so just endurance ride after that, just add volume, 2 hours, that will be fine. Weekend, they're going to have more time. Now, given that there's already 3 and 10 sessions per week and only one endurance ride, I know they're going to need another endurance ride, and I want it to be a longer one, so I'll go for the 2.5 hour again on the Saturday. That gets up to 9 hours, 40 minutes, 578 T-score. Not really high enough yet, so I'm looking, again, keeping an eye on the TSB values. So they're obviously going to be very negative because the athlete's returning to fitness. So here we then have one session left. Now, this is where the decision making comes in. What sort of work you're going to get them to do. So what I'm actually decided to do is I'm going to give them a longer sustained effort. So the Zwift races, quite surgy, usually sort of a more varied pace in that effort. The benchmark test is going to have 2 shorter efforts and 1 more sustained effort. And then again, sub-threshold with effort with surges, that's obviously a varied pace session. So I'm looking for a simple sustained effort session that they can keep seeing progress on. So obviously physiologically, I want them to be covering all bases and have sort of a sustained effort session, but it's also important for progression that they can easily see their progression. That's why I like doing sustained effort. So something like a sub-threshold sustained. I'm not going to put in any cadence, lower, you might consider putting in some lower cadence work in it. I'm not going to do that because of their injury, which is still recovering. So sub-threshold, sustained effort. Now, considering that's short and the Zwift race ends up being short, I want it to be really long. So I'm thinking like an hour, probably an hour at sub-threshold. Actually, which I got them to do last week. So that's an hour at sub-threshold. So I'll get them to repeat that actually. So I won't add in a new one. I will copy this one from last week and I will get them to repeat that. As a pretty solid week. But the athlete can handle that easily. I've been coaching them for a long time. I know that'll be fine, and they'll get good progression out of that. So then we look at stepping it up. So I'm going to get them to repeat this session. They're going to do their sub-threshold effort with surges. Sometimes you might say, well, that might be a bit intense coming after an hour at sub-threshold, but this athlete will be fine with that. I'm going to keep the weekend the same because that's just athlete. They'll really enjoy that. Getting stuck in on the Zwift race. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the Monday, to keep it progressing, I'm going to make that an endurance ride, more volume, like that. Actually, I'll make that 2 hours because I want the athlete to get up closer to sort of 13 hours. So endurance for 2 hours, which is good. Now these Zwift Academy workouts I always take with a bit of grain of salt because they'll probably be done in erg mode and it's hard to tell how hard they're going to be because they're always overly structured. So what I'm going to do is actually give them a Zwift race in here to act as more of a threshold session. So I'll get them to do a Zwift race, which will end up being sort of between 30-40 minutes. And then I'll get them to finish it off with more time at zone 2 at a high cadence. So another hour in here. So we're looking at 11 and a half. Yeah, so still not progressing enough. I'll make that an hour and a half. Okay. Now I'm just, as with any coaching, when you're doing it 4 weeks in advance, there's always a bit of guesswork. So I'll communicate with the athlete, and then quite often I'll go in and have to make changes as they get closer to these weeks. So this is just sort of a best estimate, but they've got to be flexible with it. So there we go. We're looking at 11 hours 20 minutes, 12 hours. If we go back past few weeks, so 12 hours, 10 hours, 11 hours, 12 hours. So around that is where I want them. The athlete will want to do more, and I know that, but they don't need to at this stage. So then we're looking at a similar thing for the next week, and then this week, considering that will then be, we're looking at building up to week 38. So if I then open the seasonal planning chart again, week 38, that'll be a good sort of 2 months of progressive building, and then I'm going to force them to have a lighter week here. So for the lighter week, what I'll actually do is I will add in the rest days straight away, and I'll give them a weekend day off. So that's then 3 easy days in a week. So that structure's in there. This is then a peak week. So I won't add that in. I'll add in a note after. And looking to build up to the end of this week, knowing that this lighter week's coming in there. So again, a Zwift race with some endurance, I will get them to do that. Yep, same again. So after the VO2 max day. Again, you gotta know what the athlete can handle. This is not something I do for the average athlete. This is only for them because I know they can handle it. Weekend, I want to progress this. So the endurance rides, I want that to be 3 hours now. And I will keep it just straight endurance. So putting that in there. 3 hours endurance. And then I'm sort of looking back again in terms of repeating sessions. You want them to do them enough where they can see progression in them, but not so much that they get sick of them. So this sub-threshold effort with surges, 1, 2, 3, 4. Doing that for 4 weeks. One more time. 5, 6 weeks I think is good. Any more than that, they'll get bored of it. If it's just 2 or 3 weeks, it's not long enough. They won't. There's still too much of a learning curve to most sessions. So I'll give them that one more time. Then I want them to have, in this build week, I want to see what he's got towards the end of this with a bit of a testing effort. Now he's going to push himself really hard in these, but they're not quite max effort. So what I'm going to do is put in a ride with some max efforts. And I think I got one here. Keep it unstructured, not a graded exercise test or a 20-minute test or anything like that. Just a ride where he can go out and test himself. Now, he may be back on the road at this stage, or it can be done on Zwift or whatever, so that's fine. So where is my session? Ride with 2 max hill climbs. Now, I've built these, so I know what's in them. You probably don't know what's in them, so I'm going to add that in, and I still want it to be long, so I'm thinking 3 hours, again, being a peak week. That's a sort of a testing day that I'll get him to then repeat in sort of 6 to 8 weeks' time. So then in here, we're looking at 10 hours, 20 minutes already, 623 T-sol, which is good, given that we've then got 2 days around to play with. The athlete doesn't need a rest day. I know he can handle not having a rest day. 2 hours endurance, he'll recover pretty well during that. So I will put in, repeat this one again. That's taking us 12 hours and 20 minutes. Then we've got one more session. So we've got intensity. That's very hard. Intensity. So I'm looking at an endurance or tempo ride to add the volume. That will tick us up to over 13 hours. So, okay, so I've decided to give him a tempo session instead of endurance session. I could easily put in an hour and a half endurance. That would get him up above the 13 hours. But I still think this week's going to be too easy. with that. So I'll give a tempo session instead, straight tempo from the door, which will make this week, I mean, this is a very difficult week. Intensity, 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 intensity. So, it's going to be challenging, but he needs to be overloaded. So I'm going to give him that, and I'll make this one 2 hours. So, that's really 126 T-scores hard. We can see there what sort of numbers we're getting. So TSP is getting down into the, finishing at negative 32, which is good, not crazy, but obviously very fatiguing. 14 hours, 20 minutes, and 850 T-score, which is good. So then we're looking at what are we doing on the lighter week. The third Zwift Academy workout, the recovery ride, then there needs to be enough intensity here. So what I'll do is get him to do a Zwift race with that cadence varied endurance work. I still want to have one longer ride during the week. Then we're looking at 6 hours, 55 minutes, 420. So still too easy. And then another session here, some sub-threshold, but it's going to, again, so that's the 5th week of that session, so I don't want to give him that again. I want a variation on the sub-threshold work, probably with some shorter efforts. So let me have a look. Okay, I'm going to readjust this week. So instead of having the rest day on the Saturday, I'm going to put that there to spread out the intensity over the week, so there's less of a possibly detraining effect. So intense, he needs to do that recovery ride, Zwift race, which will be difficult. Endurance, another day off. And then I want to add a threshold session, and what I'm going to do is add some longer efforts, again, with some... This session is a 16 minute sustained effort and then 2 efforts with some variations, some over-unders, just to maintain that sort of higher end threshold power going into the 3-hour endurance ride. So then this rest week is 530 T-score, 8 hours and 35 minutes. I'm guessing the athlete might do a little bit more, just knowing their history. So I tend to make these on the easier side, knowing that they're probably going to overshoot some of these sessions. So there's plenty of room to play with there. So looking at the last 3 weeks, we've got 850 T-score for 14 hours, 20 minutes for the peak. Week before drops 12 hours, 11 hours, 20 minutes as well. And then just looking at the seasonal planner chart just to make sure everything lines up. Continuing to build. And then, this lighter week, the CTL is still... holding steady. You can see it's red, indicating that the TSB is still negative on the Sunday, but it is a drop from those previous weeks. So that's the next month for this athlete. But yeah, I'll have to go and probably make some changes in a week or two's time once I've seen how the next few weeks have gone. So yeah, they need to be flexible.